Snow poured down that December morning, heavy and sure, each flake a cold reminder of how lonely a person can feel. Clarissa Hayes stood at the edge of the depot platform, her thin wool coat hardly a match for the Wyoming wind that sliced through Cedar Ridge like a butcher's knife. Too young. Mrs. Peton didn't bother to lower her voice. 18, and still a baby in her head. What man would marry a child? The women bunched by the ticket window clucked in agreement, bonnet ties flicking like little tails. Clarissa hugged her shawl tight and stared at the schedule board as if it mattered. The numbers blurred. Tears turned the ink to water. My Herald says she refused the Whitmore boy last spring. Someone added. Fool girl. Plain as fence wood and picky, too. Think she'll get better. Plain. Too young. Too foolish. Those words had followed Clarissa like shadows since folks decided she was old enough to court. In a town where girls wed at 16 and rocked cradles by 17, her waiting made her strange. Damaged goods, a few muttered. Too particular, others sniffed. The real reason was simple and tangled at once. Clarissa had watched her mother fade in a loveless home. She'd seen her father's coldness etch deeper lines in her mother's face than any prairie wind. Clarissa had promised herself she would hold out for something more than convenience, more than the first hand offered. But in Cedar Ridge, dreams like that were a luxury. Clarissa Hayes. The station master's shout echoed across the platform. Package for you. She walked toward the window, aware that every eye followed. The women drew back as if she carried illness, skirts whispering their disapproval. Old Sam Murphy, who'd known her father, pushed a small brown-wrapped parcel across. From your aunt in Missouri, he said, gruff but not unkind. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. She turned and ran right into Jonas Pike. 25. Handsome in the way a mirror loves itself, and too aware of it. He'd hovered for months, ignoring every polite refusal. Whiskey clung to his breath though noon hadn't come. Well now, Miss Clarissa, he drawled for the crowd. Still too fine for us common folk? Please let me pass, Mr. Pike. Mr. Pike, he mimicked, weaving a little. So high and proper for a girl headed for spinsterhood before 20. Think a prince is riding in to fetch you. The women hummed and nodded. Even the freight men slowed to watch. I think nothing like that, she said softly. I only want to go home. Home to what? That empty house your old man left? How long you think you can last without a man paying the bills? He stepped closer. Tobacco and malice rolled off him. His pale eyes glittered. You're past your prime already, girl. Another year and nobody will want you, not even for cleaning pots. Laughter broke around them, sharp as the wind. Clarissa's cheeks burned. She shifted to go around him. He moved with her, a cat playing with a cornered bird. Maybe she's waiting on one of them Comanche bucks, someone shouted. They like 'em young and stupid. The laughter turned mean. Clarissa clutched the parcel against her chest. She thought of her mother's China shepherdess, how it shattered when her father hurled it at the wall. That was how she felt now, thin porcelain, one breath from breaking. Let her be, Jonas, called Thomas Garrett, the schoolmaster. Enough of that talk. But Jonas, drunk on whiskey and the crowd, was past listening. He reached out a hand as if to stroke her cheek. Maybe little Miss High and Mighty needs a lesson. Show her what a real. Clarissa didn't wait to hear the rest. She shoved past with a desperate strength, his curse following her as she ran. Her boots slid on the icy boards, then hit the street. Laughter snapped behind her like gunfire. She flew down the main road, past Henderson's mercantile, where Mr. Henderson only shook his head, past the church, where Reverend Davis looked away. Her breath came in white puffs, torn to ribbons by the wind. Somewhere between the depot and the last house, her aunt's package slipped from numb fingers. She didn't stop. Only when the fields opened wide and white beyond town did she slow. The cold stabbed her lungs. Shame hurt worse. Too young, they said, yet she felt ancient, worn thin by judgment. The snow stretched forever, a silent sheet broken only by the black edge of distant trees. She had walked here often for peace. Today the quiet mocked her. Her feet kept moving without orders. The snow deepened past her ankles, soaking her worn boots. She welcomed the numbness. It was easier than the ache in her chest. "Ma," she whispered to the gray sky, "you told me to wait for love. What if it never comes? What if I am a fool?" The wind howled back. Her mother had been gone 3 winters. Her father the winter after. The little house sat empty more often than not. Clarissa took any work she could. Mending, washing, harvest help. Respectable for an unmarried woman. Barely enough to keep going. Clouds sagged heavy with more snow. She should turn back, she knew. But the thought of passing those smirks and whispers made her stomach knot. She stumbled over a hidden branch and fell hard to her knees. Pain shot up her legs. She stayed there, a penitent in the white, and let the tears come. They froze almost at once. 18 and utterly alone. Too young for love, they said, yet old enough to feel her heart crack under their scorn. Too foolish to take what's offered, yet wise enough to know a loveless match would kill her, as it had killed her mother. The wind rose, flinging stinging snow into her face. Her mother's shawl whipped like a living thing. She tried to stand. Frozen skirts tangled her legs. So this was how it would end. Not by jumping from a cliff, but by walking too far into a storm. Too proud. Too hurt. The thought brought a strange peace. The snow would hide her shame along with her body. She managed to rise, swaying like a newborn colt. The world had turned to white in every direction. Town was gone. The tree line gone. Even if she wanted to go home, what home? Only an empty house full of empty promises. She stepped into a drift up to her thighs. The cold passed numbness and slid toward dangerous warmth. Her thoughts softened at the edges. She heard, from far away, her mother's lullaby. "Sleep now, my darling. The day is done." "I'm sorry, Ma," she breathed. "I tried to wait. I tried to be strong." The wind screamed back. Clarissa sank into the snow's embrace, praying that death might finally grant the acceptance life had refused. But the prairie had other plans for the girl they called too young for love. Through the white blur moved something dark and sure, cutting the drifts toward the bright blue of her fallen shawl. The world had narrowed to wind and whiteness. Clarissa couldn't feel her feet. Her eyelids fought to stay open. The shawl weighed like ice. She fell again and could not rise. The snow cushioned her like a soft bed. It would be easy, she thought. Close her eyes. Let the cold pull her under. No more whispers. No more nights alone. Then, through the storm's veil, a shape appeared. For a breath, she thought death had come. Some tall spirit of the plains. The figure seemed impossibly large, walking the deep snow as if it were grass. Closer, he resolved into flesh and breath. A man, but unlike any man of Cedar Ridge. Bare chest despite the killing cold. Skin scored with scars that told stories she could not read. Dark hair whipped around a face cut sharp as stone. His eyes, through her dimming sight she could see, were deep brown, calm as good earth, a calm that seemed to quiet the storm around him. Comanche. The word flickered through her fading mind, tangled with every warning she'd heard since childhood. Savage, dangerous, heathen. Yet when he dropped to one knee, beside her, his movements were smooth and controlled. He spoke. In a language she didn't know, voice deep and steady like far thunder. When she didn't answer, couldn't, he reached out a large hand toward her face. She should have screamed. She had no strength left to fear. Those earth-brown eyes held something she hadn't seen in months. Recognition, not of who she was, but of how she felt. Alone. Judged. Found lacking. His fingers, warm even in the freeze, brushed the icy tracks of her tears with careful gentleness. He spotted the shawl, half buried near her. The bright blue wool, with her mother's careful stitches, gleamed against the white. He shook it free and wrapped it around her shoulders, hands lingering to make sure it held. Such simple care, so different from the cruelty she'd fled, broke something hard inside her. "Please," she whispered. She didn't know what she was asking for. Mercy. Saving. To be seen. He studied her, then decided. He lifted her as easily as a child. The shock of arms around her, of being carried, of mattering enough to save, spun her into darkness. Warmth came first when she surfaced. It almost hurt after the cold. Then the scent of wood smoke and sage, the feel of leather and fur, the wind now a muffled hum outside walls she couldn't yet see. She opened her eyes. A small shelter, logs packed with mud and moss. A low fire crackled under a smoke hole. Buffalo robes covered the floor. Furs wrapped her like a cocoon. He sat cross-legged by the fire, feeding it with neat, patient motions. He'd put on a shirt, soft deerskin, and tied back his hair, showing the strong lines of his face. He turned, sensing she was awake. "You saved me," she croaked. He nodded. He lifted a wooden cup. Steam curled from it, smelling of bitter herbs. He moved slowly, showing his intent, and helped her sit to drink. Heat spread down her throat and into her limbs. Over the rim, she studied him. Younger than she'd thought, perhaps 30 winters. Still, quiet, a man comfortable with silence. "Thank you," she said. Their fingers brushed as he took the empty cup, and that odd spark of being seen flickered again. He said something low and musical in his own tongue. She shook her head. He stopped talking, but his hand spoke. He gestured to her feet. She looked and sucked in a breath. He'd removed her soaked boots and wrapped her feet in soft rabbit fur. It should have scandalized her, but there was no impropriety in him, only plain care. He ladled from a pot she hadn't noticed. The smell made her stomach twist with hunger. Had she eaten yesterday? The day before? Time had slipped away. He brought a bowl, stew, likely venison, with wild onion and other things she didn't know. When she wobbled upright, he steadied her, strong, careful, as if she might break. The first spoonful almost made her cry, not only for hunger, but for the shock of being fed. In Cedar Ridge, she had done the caring, mother, father, neighbors with coins to spare. When had anyone last cared for her, with no price attached? He moved about, sealing drafts, adding wood, tucking furs when she shivered. Every motion spare and practiced, like a man who lived at peace with hard weather instead of fighting it. When her bowl was empty, weariness crashed over her. He saw it, took the dish, and motioned for her to lie down. She should have feared a stranger, a Comanche warrior in a lonely shelter. But fear took energy she didn't have. And in 1 hour, he'd shown more respect than Jonas Pike had in months. As sleep pulled at her, she watched him settle by the door, broad back against the wall, setting himself between her and whatever might come. Guardian. Protector. What Cedar Ridge men called themselves and were not. The storm raged outside. Inside, wrapped in furs that smelled of smoke and earth, Clarissa felt something she hadn't felt since her mother died. Safe. The giant Comanche kept quiet watch. Somewhere in her drifting dreams, her mother's voice returned. Not an ending lullaby, but a whisper of beginnings. Pale light slipped through the smoke hole when she woke again. The storm had scraped the sky clean. The world outside would be bright and new. He was still there, watching, waiting. The fire hadn't died all night. The furs were tucked around her, as if by a careful mother's hands. She sat up slowly. Everything ached, but in a good, living way. not the numb edge of death. When she managed a small smile, something eased in his face, not quite a smile back, but a softening that felt like one. He spoke, and this time she understood a single word. Talon. He touched his chest. Talon, she repeated. He nodded. His name. I'm Clarissa. Clarissa, he echoed, shaping the sound with care. Her name, simple as it was, sounded different from his mouth, almost pretty. He poured more tea and helped her sit to drink. As the warmth spread, her mind raced ahead to the thing she dreaded. Cedar Ridge. The stairs. The whispers. The way Jonas had looked at her like a challenge to conquer. Her hands trembled around the cup. Talon glanced toward the door, then back at her, and made a rough map in the air, his hand sweeping where she guessed the town lay. A question. I don't know, she said, knowing he wouldn't catch the words. They don't want me there. Too young. Too foolish. The rest stuck in her throat. He studied her, then crouched by the hearth and used a stick to draw on the packed earth. A circle for the sun moving across the sky. 1 mark. 2. 3. He looked up. A question again. Stay, she guessed. 3 days? He nodded, then waited, as if her answer mattered more than anything. Every rule she'd been taught shouted no. An unmarried girl alone with a man. Worse, a Comanche. Whatever was left of her reputation would shatter. But then she saw Jonas's smirk in her mind, heard Mrs. Peton's needle-sharp voice. What reputation was left to guard? Clarissa took the stick from Talon. Below his 3 marks, she drew 3 more. 6, she said. Her voice steadied. 6 days to be seen as something other than a problem to fix. 6 days to be a person worth saving from a storm. Talon inclined his head once. Decision accepted without comment, without judgment. He rose and took down a pair of snowshoes, pointed to himself, to the door, then to the pot. He would go out. She would be warm. Food was ready. He added wood to the fire, checked the latch, and left. Alone, Clarissa wrapped her mother's shawl, now dried by the fire, tight around her shoulders. Outside, the land was white and hard and unforgiving. Inside, kindness spoke a language she understood. In this small shelter, tended by a man who hardly shared a word with her, she had found something she hadn't known she needed. A place where she did not have to apologize for existing. Hours, folded together in a steady, quiet rhythm. At noon, Talon came back with a white rabbit and a bundle of winter herbs. He moved with calm speed, skinning the rabbit with practiced hands. Clarissa started to rise, to help as she had always done at home. He stopped her with a gentle gesture. Rest. Heal. The ease of that command felt almost sinful. When had she last been allowed to simply be? Even as a child, she had been measuring, mending, hauling water, trying to be useful. Here, her being alive was enough. She watched him when he wasn't watching her. His hands were marked with scars, each one a story. The way he walked, silent, controlled, reminded her of a mountain cat. Yet when he handled the pot, when he shifted the furs, he was surprisingly gentle. The stew he made didn't taste like her mother's, but it tasted like freedom. Wild onion meat, a touch of some bitter herb that warmed her from the inside out. The spoon had been carved by his own knife. Its handle was smooth from long use. "Thank you," she said again, rough with gratitude. Her words felt small. He ate across the fire, unhurried, content to let the quiet be. In Cedar Ridge, silence meant displeasure. Here, silence felt like trust. Dusk settled. Shame crept back, cold and sly. Alone with a man. No chaperone. No witness. Her face must have shown the worry, because Talon made a low questioning sound. She shook her head, unable to explain. He stood, rooted through his things, and returned with a woven wool blanket patterned in bright shapes. With careful hands he strung it across the room, making a curtain between his space and hers. A wall not to shut her in, but to protect her. Tears stung fresh. He noticed, of course. He always noticed. He said something in his own tongue, soft, asking, but she only whispered, "You're kind." Not what they said. Not savage. Just, words failed. He listened, as if her broken sentences were worth hearing. Then he tried one of his own. "Kind," he repeated, the word new on his mouth. He tapped his chest and shook his head, then pointed at her. "You. Kind." "I'm not," she protested. "I'm foolish. Too young. Too proud. Too difficult." The litany spilled out. The poisoned Cedar Ridge had poured into her. He cut the air with a clean, firm motion. "No," he pointed from his eyes to her, then drew a circle in the air big enough to hold all of her. "I see you," the gesture said. "And you are not what they say." She turned away, undone by the simple mercy of being seen truly by someone who had nothing to gain. He vanished behind the curtain, giving her space. She heard the rustle of furs as he settled on the harder ground, leaving the softest place by the fire for her. Sleep came slowly. Every sound made her flinch, the pop of sap, the wind testing the walls, the shift of his breathing. Then the noises became familiar, markers of safety. At some dark hour, she woke and found the fire low. Habit lifted her before thought could stop her. A hand, warm, steady, touched her arm and guided her back. Talon moved like a shadow. He shook his head gently. Rest. He built the fire with neat motions while she watched. Firelight carved lines along his jaw and shoulders. He was handsome, but not the polished, smug kind the town prized. He was weather-carved, honest, true. When he caught her watching, there was no swagger, only that steady look, as if noticing each other was the most natural thing in the world. Before he ducked behind the curtain again, he tossed an extra fur onto her pile. "Be warm," the axe said. "You matter." Morning brought drip, 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 the world beginning to thaw. Talon returned from fetching water and spoke with his hands. Paths clearing, the way to town opening soon. Her stomach clenched. She stared into the coals until he came to sit nearby, not close enough to crowd her, close enough to anchor her. He drew on a flat piece of bark with charcoal. A bird shape. He tapped his chest. "Talon." Then he sketched a circle with rays. "The sun." He pointed at her, lifted his hand as if to warm his face. "Clarissa," he said carefully, then gestured to the sun's light. Was he calling her sunshine? The idea startled a laugh out of her, but he was serious, trying hard to give meaning she would understand. He added mountains, trees, a bending river, two small figures walking. He pointed at the drawing, at himself, at her. A question hung in the air. Come with me? Fear and thrill braided together. To leave everything she knew for the unknown. But what was she really leaving? A town that had already judged and dismissed her. A life too small for her breath. He lifted a hand. "Wait," the gesture said. Not now. 6 days, they had agreed. He would keep his word. He was simply letting her know the world had more than one path. The day drifted like a calm stream. He showed her small things, how to bank a fire so it would still glow come morning, which dry leaves made good tea, how to read the sky's thin lines for weather. She taught him words, snow, fire, thank you, and felt pride bloom when he repeated them in that low, careful voice. That night, he brought out a narrow-bone flute. The tune he played wasn't like church hymns or the fiddler reels at town dances. It was wild and lonely and free, full of wide skies and stars. When the last note faded, something in her chest shifted. Not love yet. She was too bruised and weary. But the idea of it. The idea that love might be something different than what Cedar Ridge offered. Not a problem to solve or a prize to win. Maybe love could be a shelter in a storm. On the third morning, Hard light crisped the air. Talon was already up. He'd set out a bowl of warm water and a soft strip of leather as a washcloth. Such a small courtesy, and yet it moved her more than any grand gift. In her father's house, she had always risen first to heat water for others. Here, the rhythm was shared. Care, without keeping score. After corn cakes and dried berries, Talon motioned toward the door and handed her fur-lined moccasins. Outside, the world glittered. Snowdrift still crouched in the shade, but black earth peered through. He led her to a steaming spring, showed her where deer and rabbits had left tracks, even the faint prints of small birds. When she slipped, his hand steadied her and vanished, respectful as always. They worked together, without chatter, carrying water, gathering dry grasses for kindling. Without planning, they began to move in step. He built the fire. She set their stores in order. A wordless rhythm, each doing what needed doing, trusting the other to do the rest. That afternoon he taught her to mend hide with sinew and a bone needle, to spot the plants that stayed useful even under snow, to read the sky's pale streaks. When she pricked her finger, he took her hand and looked closely. No heat in the touch, only care. He dabbed a pine-scented salve on the tiny wound. "Thank you," she whispered. He glanced around the shelter and then back at her, his English careful. "No, thank you." Only then did she see what he meant. Without thinking, she had been making the place a home, arranging tools, tidying corners, setting things where hands could find them. Even here, with a man whose words she could barely share, she had started building a life. That evening she talked. He couldn't understand the words, but he listened as if each one was a bead to be counted. She told him about her mother, the shattered china shepherdess, the quiet that turned cruel in her parents' house, the whispers in town, the labels that stuck. When her voice gave out, he spoke in his own language, voice rising and falling like a stream over stones. She didn't understand, but she heard loss and duty and the weight of others' rules. On the fourth day, he strapped on his bow and knife and handed her a smaller blade in a beaded sheath. For safety, his hand said. They walked an hour through trees and bright clearings. He showed her what she would have missed. Bare scratches high on bark, the chalky pellets under an owl's roost, a narrow deer trail hidden in brush. He moved like he belonged to the land. She tried to copy his quiet steps, clumsy colt beside a sure-footed stallion. They reached a ridge where the ground fell away like a map. Far off, smoke curled over Cedar Ridge. The buildings looked toy-small. Clarissa's stomach lurched. Talon watched her, then pointed to town, then to her. A question. "Not yet," she said aloud, though he might not grasp the words. "Please, not yet." He nodded anyway, as if he knew exactly what she meant. He pointed then to purple mountains, standing like sentries, and made the bird sign again. His people lived somewhere beyond those peaks. Would he take her there if she asked? The thought scared her, and lit something bright inside. They returned at dusk and dressed the rabbits he had snared. Her hands were surer with the bone knife. When she slipped the hide free in one clean piece, he gave a small nod that warmed her more than any townswoman's praise. Later, she hummed an old song her mother had loved. She stopped embarrassed, but he gestured for more. So she sang, soft at first, then clear. When she finished, he sang back, deep and steady, a melody as wide and wild as the land. On the fifth day, warmth ran in rivulets around the shelter. Snow sagged and dropped, puddles formed, and the drip never stopped. Time, their secret friend, was running thin. Maybe that's why, when she reached for a bundle on a high shelf and couldn't quite get it, he stepped in close. His chest grazed her back as he lifted the herbs down. They froze there for one long breath, the scent of leather and sage, the solid heat of him. Then he stepped away. Nothing had happened. Everything had changed. That night she lay awake, listening to him breathe behind the curtain. Tomorrow would be the 6th day. After that, she must choose, back to Cedar Ridge and the smallness that waited, or forward into the unknown with a man whose language she barely spoke, but whose character she had begun to trust. Every rule in her head said turn back. But in the dark, a thought came clear and sharp as starlight. Maybe being beyond redemption, in their eyes was another name for freedom. An owl called. Another answered. Even in wild places, creatures found their own kind. Clarissa pulled her mother's shawl close and let her eyes fall shut. Tomorrow would demand courage. Tonight she had warmth, safety, and, for the first time in her life, contentment. The 6th morning broke hard and bright. Sun flashed on melting drifts like scattered glass. Clarissa woke with a heaviness she couldn't shake. 6 days were up. When she stepped from behind the curtain, Talon was already moving with quiet purpose. He'd laid out warm clothes for her and was packing 2 bundles, one for him, one for her. He looked up, and in his dark eyes she read a question he didn't press into words. He pointed to the packs, then to the door, then held his hand toward the direction of town. 2 paths, 2 choices. He was ready for either. "We'll need supplies," she said softly, knowing he'd catch her meaning, if not the syllables. Flour, salt, maybe coffee. Even if she stayed longer, some things had to be bought. He nodded. Before they left, he banked the fire with care, set the latch, and looked around the small room the way one looks back at a place that has kept a soul alive. Not abandoned, only waiting. The way to Cedar Ridge was longer than the wild, panicked run that had taken her out of it. Meltwater soaked the path. Ice stalked the shaded patches. Talon walked ahead, testing the ground with the patience of a hunter. Where the footing turned slick, he reached back for her. Each time their hands met, a small spark jumped like flint to steel. The town's edges came into view, the church steeple, the false front of the mercantile, the depot where her shame had started. Clarissa slowed without meaning to. Talon stopped at once and turned to face her, steady as always. He tried English. "I with you." The 4 quiet words nearly broke her. No one had stood beside her like that. Not once. They came in from the east, not down the main road, but eyes found them anyway. A woman at a pump froze with the bucket halfway up. Children shrieked and dashed inside. By the time they pushed open Henderson's door, half the town peered through glass and cracks. The bell chimed. The store looked empty, but the street hummed like a beehive. Mr. Henderson stood behind the counter, his face working through surprise, worry, then calculation. "Miss Hayes," he said carefully. Folks were concerned. "You vanished in the storm." "I was rescued," Clarissa answered. "This is Talon. He saved my life, Tom." Henderson's gaze slid to the tall man beside her, took in the scars, the calm, the beaded shirt worn for a serious errand. "I see," he said, though his voice sounded unsure. What can I get you?" "Flour, salt, coffee if you have any." Clarissa set her small purse on the counter, the clink of coins too loud in the thin air. Henderson moved to fill the order without his usual chatter. The quiet stretched tight. The bell banged again. Jonas Pike swaggered into the doorway with 2 boys at his back. Drink or anger had flushed his face. It was hard to tell which. Well, he drawled. "Look what the storm spit out." And with a savage on a leash. The word hit the floor like spit. Talon gave no sign he'd heard the insult, but Clarissa felt him shift, barely. So he stood between her and Jonas. "We're buying supplies, Mr. Pike," she said, and kept her voice steady. "Supplies for what?" Jonas sneered. "Playing house with your heathen?" "You disappeared nearly a week," one of his friends added. "Come back with him. And we're supposed to do what?" "To mind our own business," said a firm voice from the door. Ruth Carver, the midwife, stepped inside. She moved as if the space belonged to her. Of all the town's women, she was one who had ever looked at Clarissa with true kindness. "The girl is plainly unharmed," Ruth went on. "Unharmed." Jonas barked a laugh. "She's been holed up with a savage." "Her reputation was your sport long before she left," Ruth shot back. "I heard you at the depot, Jonas Pike. Shameful talk to a girl who simply told you no." Color deepened in his cheeks. "She's too proud. Too good for you, maybe." Ruth planted herself at Clarissa's side, her face hard as a fence post. "If she says this man saved her, I believe her. That storm would have killed anyone caught out in it." "But she stayed with him," one of the boys blurted. "Alone. For days." "And lived," Ruth said dryly. "Seems to speak well of his honor, doesn't it?" Silence pressed in. Henderson had set the bag of flour on the counter and stopped there, eyes flicking from face to face. Outside, the crowd thickened. Talon spoke, his English slow, but sure. "She cold. Dying. I help. No harm." He searched for the right word and found it. Respect. It's hard to paint a man as a monster when he chooses careful, decent words. Jonas's mouth worked, but sound didn't come for a second. "Respect," he spat at last. "Is it respect to ruin a white girl's name? To pull her from her own kind?" "My own kind." Clarissa felt heat surge through the chill. "You mean the kind that called me too young, too foolish, too proud? The kind that laughed while you baited me at the depot? The kind that shoved me into a storm with your cruelty?" "Now, Clarissa," Henderson began, nervous, "let's not." "No," she said, and her voice didn't shake. "I've been quiet long enough. This man," she lifted a hand toward Talon, "showed me more kindness in 6 days than this town has in 18 years. He fed me, warmed me, kept me safe." Her voice thinned, then found strength again. "He made me believe I was worth saving, not for being young enough or pretty enough or obedient enough, but for being human." The store went still. Even Jonas's mouth finally shut. Ruth blinked as if holding back tears. "So yes," Clarissa said, chin lifted. "I stayed. And I may stay again. I'd rather be ruined, in the eyes of people who never valued me, than go back to the girl you mocked." "You don't know what you're saying," Jonas managed. "You're a child, too young too. Too young for love," she finished for him. "I've heard it." She stepped forward. Talon let her, though she felt him there like a stone wall. "But I'm not too young to spot cruelty. I'm not too young to choose kindness. I'm not too young to make my own choices." Jonas's hand slid toward his gun belt, a show more than a draw. Talon moved with a speed that wasn't show at all. He didn't reach for his knife. He simply caught Jonas's wrist in one hand. Jonas's face drained of color. The strength in that grip was plain. "No," Talon said low and even. "You hurt her. Not with hands. Not with words." Tension snapped like a taut wire. Then Ruth's voice cut through. "I think Mr. Pike and his friends were just leaving. Weren't you?" Something in her tone, the authority of a woman who had brought half this town into the world, made Jonas falter. Talon released him at once. No extra pressure. No threat held longer than needed. "This isn't over," Jonas mumbled, already backing toward the door. His friends went with him, eyes down. The order finished fast after that. Henderson packed the salt and coffee and set a fair price, as if fairness could fix the air. Ruth carried a sack to the threshold, then surprised Clarissa with a quick, fierce hug. "You've got spine, girl," she whispered. "Don't let them snap it." Outside, a line of faces watched, some tight with disapproval, some merely curious, a few mostly women, softer than she expected. Clarissa stepped into the street with her head high. Talon walked beside her, not in front, not behind. At the edge of town, she turned once. Cedar Ridge looked small in the noon sun, just a scatter of boards holding other people's rules. People who were as lost and searching as she had been, only they'd stopped looking. Your choice, Talon said. The words were easier on his tongue now. Stay. Go. Your choice. She looked up at him. The man who had saved her body from the cold and something inside her from worse. The man who offered options, not orders. I choose to go, she said. For now I go with you. He nodded, as if that was the answer he had hoped for but didn't own. As they walked away, Clarissa felt weight slide off her shoulders, the heavy coat of other people's expectations. Behind them, doors banged, voices rose. By nightfall the story would be everywhere. Clarissa Hayes had chosen a Comanche warrior over respectability. Let them talk. She had food in her sack, a steady companion at her side, and ahead, maybe, a life with room for all of her. They reached the shelter as the sky tipped gold and rose. Tomorrow would bring new hard things and new choices. Tonight, she wasn't too young or too old, too proud or too meek. She was simply Clarissa, walking beside Talon. They were not what the world expected, but maybe they were exactly what their hearts needed. The quiet days that followed were busy on the surface and uneasy underneath. Clarissa learned to smoke meat, to seal hides against wet, to read the fine signs that mean weather. The work steadied her hands, but she and Talon both felt a new storm gathering, one not born in the clouds. It came on the 10th morning. The light was dull. The air tasted of metal. Hoofbeats hammered the quiet. Then fists hit the door. Clarissa Hayes. Jonas's voice, too loud, rode the wind. We've come to take you home, where you belong. Clarissa peered through the small window. 8 men at least. Some she knew, some strangers. Rifles glinted. Faces were set like stone. You need to come out, called Matthew Brennan from the council, trying to sound reasonable. This nonsense has gone on long enough. We're here to rescue you. Talon moved soundlessly toward his weapons, then caught Clarissa's eye and lifted a hand. Wait. He pointed to the door, then to her mouth. Speak through it. Do not open. I don't need rescuing, Mr. Brennan, she called. I'm here by choice. No white woman chooses a savage, Jonas snapped. He's tricked you or scared you. Come out and we'll forget this. Talon's look asked the only question that mattered. What do you want? Brennan tried again. Choose right now, Miss Hayes. Come back to town and folks'll forgive. Stay, and you're putting yourself outside decent society. No Christian woman would, someone started. Then maybe I'm not your kind of Christian, Clarissa cut in. Her voice rang stronger than her knees felt. The Christ I know welcomed the outsider and shielded the weak. He didn't ride with armed men to force women into lives they didn't want. A murmur rippled. Some of the men shifted, uncomfortable. Jonas shouted over them. Enough. We're taking you, willing or no. It's what your father would have wanted. Her father, who wanted silence more than joy. Heat rose in her chest, fierce and clean. Talon opened the door before she could. He stepped out empty-handed, but taller somehow in the pale light. The men edged back without meaning to. She choose, he said, words clear. Not you. Her. You don't speak here, savage, Jonas growled. White men are talking. Are they? Came a new voice. Ruth Carver walked from the trees like a judge. She was not alone. Women from town stepped in behind her. The minister's wife, the schoolmaster's sister, Mrs. Henderson. They moved as one and planted themselves between rifles and door. Ruth, what is this? Brennan demanded. What we should have done a long time ago, she answered. Stand for a woman's right to choose her path. You men shoved her into that storm with your words. Now you want to drag her back to more of the same. She's in sin, one man protested. Is she? Ruth lifted an eyebrow. Or are you assuming the worst because it fits your tale? Clarissa stepped to Talon's side. I've chosen, she said. Kindness over cruelty. Respect over reputation. My choice. You choose to be a Jonas spat a word that made several women gasp. Talon didn't lunge. He merely stepped forward and spoke with iron certainty. She good woman. Strong. Brave. His gaze passed over each face. You come many, because fear won. You call names, because fear truth. He paused. She too good for you. Silence filled the air like a tree. Jonas's hand twitched near his gun, but Mrs. Brennan, his own cousin, stepped out. Don't you dare, she snapped. You've shamed us enough. She made a choice. You don't get to force her. The minister's wife spoke, voice calm as a river. I don't approve, but the Lord gave us free will. We won't take hers. The men's wall cracked. Some stared at their boots. Jonas's fury flared, then broke weirdly. He seemed smaller. You'll regret this, he hissed at Clarissa. When he leaves you. When you're truly ruined. Talon simply moved, so that his body blocked Jonas's line to her. No more words, he said. Go. Something in the tone, not threat, but absolute decision, made Jonas step back. The others were already drifting, pulled by their wives' eyes more than by fear of Talon. This isn't finished. Jonas tossed over his shoulder as he mounted. Yes, it is, Ruth said. Anyone comes again with threats answers to the women of Cedar Ridge. We've been quiet about our daughters too long. No more. The women lingered, soft words trading hands like small gifts. The minister's wife slipped a paper-wrapped parcel into Clarissa's palm. Tea and sugar, she whispered. Be happy, whatever that means for you. When the clearing emptied, Clarissa's strength trembled. Talon guided her inside, wrapped a blanket around her, then knelt so his eyes met hers. You brave, he said softly. More than warriors. I was terrified, she admitted. Brave not mean no fear, he said. Brave mean fear, but stand anyway. You stand. You choose. You speak true. He searched for a word, found it with quiet pride. I proud. The word struck deeper than any praise she'd ever heard. They might come back, she whispered. Maybe, he allowed. But now you have allies. Women see. Women strong. A small smile touched his mouth. Women together, more danger than men with guns. Despite everything, she laughed. Ruth certainly showed them. He grew serious. Now you choose again. Stay here, always fighting. Or, he gestured toward the mountains. Come. My people. New life. She had dodged that choice long enough. If I come, she asked, what am I to your people? To you. He considered, careful as always. First, guest. Protected. Learn ways. He held her gaze. Then you choose. Stay go. Friend. Maybe more. Always you choose. And if they don't accept me? Some not, he said honestly. Like here. Some yes. My mother, she like you. Strong, speak true. My sister too. They understand. When, she asked. When you ready, he answered. Tomorrow. Next moon. Next season. He touched her hand lightly. No hurry. No force. I wait. It was the gentleness of the offer, the lack of pressure, that decided her. 3 days, she said. Give me 3 days to gather what I'll take. Then we go. He nodded once. 3 days, he agreed. I teach words. We prepare. Peace settled over her like a warm shawl. All her life, people had tried to rush her into a shape that didn't fit. Here, she had time and the right to choose. For the first time since she could remember, she felt exactly the right age for what came next. The second night of their 3-day wait split open with hoofbeats. One horse. Fast. Talon was at the slit of a window before Clarissa could stand. A voice carried through the dark. Miss Clarissa. It's Ruth Carver. I must warn you. Talon unbarred the door with care. Ruth swung down from her old mare, breath steaming, cheeks raw from cold. She didn't waste a second. Jonas has gone wild, she said. He's been at the bottle all day, riling himself up. He swears he's riding here tonight, alone. Says if he can't have you, then no one will. Clarissa felt the cold go deeper than the wind. When? Soon, Ruth said. I came as fast as I could. The others won't follow him. Your stand at the store shamed some sense into them. But Jonas, she shook her head. He's not himself. Talon had already moved, checking latches, placing water, laying out gear. Clarissa caught his arm. No, she said, steady as she could. No blood if we can help it. He comes to hurt, Talon answered, simple and true. I know. But if you kill him, they'll hunt you and blame me. His death would prove their worst stories. She turned to Ruth. Ride back. Bring witnesses if you can. I'll try, Ruth said, squeezing Clarissa's hands. Be careful, child. A drunk man with pride to defend will do foolish things. After Ruth vanished into the black trees, they set the room like a small fort. Talon showed Clarissa where to stand, how to brace the door, how to duck if shots came. But when the reckless thud of a lathered horse finally staggered into the clearing, Clarissa chose a different path. I'm going out, she said. Danger. Talon snapped, the word sharp in his mouth. Stay. If I hide, he'll claim I was afraid and in need of saving, she said. If I face him, maybe it ends. They argued in quick, low bursts, his instinct to shield, her resolve to stand. At last he gave a tight nod, but only after placing himself in the shadows outside, close enough to strike, far enough not to provoke. Jonas swung off his horse and nearly fell. Mud splashed up his trousers. His hat hung crooked. Rage and whiskey burned in his eyes. A pistol rode at his hip, a rifle on the saddle. The real danger, though, was the look that said he felt wronged by the world. There you are, he slurred. My proud Clarissa. You think you're too fine for me. Go home, Jonas, she said, voice even though her heart raced. Sleep this off. Don't do something you'll never mend. Regret. He barked a hard laugh. Like you'll regret choosing that savage over your own people? I regret only the years I tried to fit a part that wasn't mine. She didn't step back as he stumbled closer. I'm not yours, Jonas. I never was. You could have been, he threw back, and for a flicker the hurt under the fury showed. I courted you decent, offered marriage, a roof, respectability, but you always wanting more. I wanted kindness, she said, to be seen as a person, not a trophy or a problem to fix. So the savage gives you that? He sneered. You're a novelty to him, a white woman to conquer. You're wrong. She watched his hand drift toward his gun. He's shown me more respect in 2 weeks than you did in 2 years. He asks nothing. He demands nothing. He'll ruin you. No, Jonas. You and the others tried that, calling me too young, too proud, too everything. But I'm not ruined. She took one step forward. I'm free. The word lit his anger like kindling. His fingers closed on the pistol, but he didn't get to pull. Talon stepped from the dark, silent as a shadow, fast as a hawk. He didn't strike. He stripped the pistol from Jonas's hand in a clean twist and sent it skidding into the night. Jonas swung, clumsy and off balance. Talon slid aside, then locked Jonas's wrist with an iron grip. For a breath they froze. Jonas all rage, Talon all steady. You don't deserve her, Jonas spat. No, Talon said, and the answer startled all of them. But she choose. Not you. Not me. Her. The simple truth punched the fight out of Jonas. His knees buckled. Talon let go. Jonas sank into the mud and stared up, lost in a way Clarissa had never seen. Why, he whispered raw now. What does he have that I don't? Clarissa knelt, skirts soaking cold. He sees me, Jonas. Not an idea. Not a prize. Me. I could have. No, her tone stayed gentle. You loved the picture in your head. You never once asked what I wanted. His shoulders shook. Drink, cold, shame, it didn't matter. He looked young and broken. Go home, she said, rising. Find someone who wants what you offer. Let me find my way. For a moment, she thought he might soften. Then pride clawed back. He lurched up, glaring past her at Talon. This isn't over. When he tosses you aside, Jonas Pike, Ruth's voice cracked like a whip. She rode in, with 3 more figures close behind, Thomas Garrett, Reverend Davis, and Matthew Brennan. Others trailed them on the road. That's enough, son, Brennan said, tired to the bone. You've shamed yourself enough tonight. Jonas whirled, saw numbers, saw faces that weren't cheering. He sagged. You're all fools, he muttered. She's picking a savage over her people. She's choosing her path, Reverend Davis said quietly. As the Lord allows. Judge not, Jonas. Thomas Garrett took Jonas's elbow. Come on. Before you do something you can't undo. As they got him to his horse, Ruth came to Clarissa. Are you sure? She asked, soft but direct. If you go with him, you may not be able to come back. Clarissa glanced at Talon, who stood close enough to be support and far enough to leave the decision untouched. She looked at the small ring of townsfolk, 1 or 2 who had helped, more who had simply watched. I've never been more sure, she said, clear. You may think I'm too young for this choice. I'd rather make my own mistakes than live somebody else's life. Ruth studied her face for a long breath, then nodded. Then take my blessing. Not all of Cedar Ridge condemns you. The minister stepped forward, hesitant. If you want, I can speak a blessing over you both. God hears in all places. Tears stung Clarissa's eyes. Thank you. Talon's people have their own ways. We'll honor both when it's time. Ruth's brows rose. So you two aren't? No, Clarissa said. Despite what Jonas claims, Talon has been nothing but honorable. We go as companions first. The rest will come when it comes. A ripple of surprise ran through the group, and with it, maybe, a small measure of respect. Thomas turned to Talon and said simply, Take care of her. She's rare. I protect, Talon answered. Careful English thick with feeling. Not change. She like wildflower, beautiful, because free. The words landed like a soft bell. Several women blinked. As the riders drifted away, Jonas slumped over his saddle. Clarissa heard one whisper to another, maybe she's not too young after all. Only when the last hoofbeat faded did her body shake. Talon guided her inside and settled her by the fire. You were right, she said. I was in danger. But you faced it, he replied. You stood. You spoke true. Now finished. He paused, choosing words. He not come back. How can you know? His pride broken, Talon said. He must heal or get small inside. Either way, no more danger to you. Clarissa thought of Jonas kneeling in the mud, a boy under a man's bluster. I hope he heals, she whispered. I hope he finds someone who wants what he offers. You kind, Talon said softly, even to one who harms. He's not my enemy, she murmured. He's lost. Like I was. Like I might be still if you hadn't found me in the snow. Talon knelt so their eyes were level. Not found, he said. You find yourself. I give warm place to do it. The plain wisdom of that left her breathless. She touched his cheek, feeling the heat of skin, the roughness of jaw. Tomorrow, she said. One more day to gather what I'll take. Then we begin. He pressed her hand to his face and let it go. Tomorrow, he agreed. New road. Your steps. Sleep came late. When it did, it was full of faces. Ruth's sure eyes, the Reverend's careful kindness, Thomas's steady support, even Brennan's weary patience. Leaving wouldn't cut every thread. Some ties would hold, thin but real. Morning, she folded her small life into bundles. her mother's shawl, 2 favorite books, the China shepherdess rescued from the ruins of childhood. Little things to carry into the unknown. As dusk fell, winds sang around the eaves, no longer lonely, but wide with promise. She wasn't too young for love. She wasn't too proud or too difficult. She was simply Clarissa, choosing at last. Freedom tasted like cold air and hot tea, and a man's quiet breathing on the other side of a curtain. Tomorrow, they would take the first steps. Tonight, for once, she was exactly where she needed to be. Here's your hook. The morning she chose her own life. The sky turned the pure blue of a clean slate. Dawn broke sharp and bright. Frost jeweled the branches. The air tasted like glass. Clarissa stood outside the shelter that had kept her alive, her small bundles stacked and tied. The China shepherdess was wrapped in cloth between her mother's shawl and her father's old Bible, not for sermons, but for the names and dates of kin. They were the roots she would carry forward. Talon had risen long before sunrise. He moved with quiet purpose, checking straps, counting rations, smoothing the backs of 2 horses, the paint he rode and the gentle mare he'd fetched back for her. He'd made a simple carrier for her things, crafted to keep them steady on the trail. No words, just care. Hoofbeats approached. Clarissa stiffened, but Talon's steady stance said he expected company. Ruth Carver led the small group into the clearing. With her came several women from town, and, to Clarissa's surprise, Thomas Garrett and Reverend Davis. "We won't let you leave without a proper farewell," Ruth said, swinging down with the ease of long practice. "And we brought a few things you might need." They handed over simple gifts, jars of preserves, bundles of herbs, cloth, needles, a twist of thread, small medicines. Practical help, but something more rode with it, acknowledgement. Not cheers, not scorn. Recognition of her right to choose. "I wrote a letter," Thomas said, offering a sealed envelope. "To the Territorial School Board. If you ever need a post, if you want options, this may open a door. You were one of my brightest. That hasn't changed." Reverend Davis stepped forward next, hat in his hands. "I may not grasp every part of your road, Clarissa, but I know courage when I see it. May God go with you, wherever you walk." One by one, the women hugged her. Some whispered courage into her ear. Others squeezed her hands with wordless strength. Mrs. Henderson pressed a small purse into Clarissa's palm. "From several of us," she murmured. "A woman should have her own money. Always." Another rider appeared on the ridge. Clarissa's breath caught. Not Jonas, thank heaven. A girl slid from the saddle, fair hair, young face. Sarah Pike, Jonas's sister, barely 16. "Sarah, why are you here?" Ruth asked, sharp with worry. The girl lifted her chin, looking suddenly older. "To apologize for my brother, for my family, and to tell you that you're brave." She met Clarissa's eyes. "They say you're too young for love, but they tried to marry me at 15. They praise pride when it means being a proper lady, then call it prideful when we speak. They say you're foolish, but what's foolish about choosing kindness over cruelty?" Clarissa took the girl's hands. "Thank you," she said simply. "Take care of yourself. Remember, you have the right to choose, too." Sarah's eyes shone, but her voice held. "I won't forget. None of us will." As goodbyes wound down, Ruth lingered. "You've stirred something in this town," she said, a small smile in the lines of her face. "Maybe we'll ask better questions about our daughters and the lives we press on them. Change is slow here, but it comes. You planted seeds." "I only wanted to be free," Clarissa said, barely above a whisper. "And in claiming it, you showed others it's possible," Ruth replied, pulling her into one last fierce embrace. "Be happy, Clarissa Hayes, in whatever shape that takes." When the riders turned back toward Cedar Ridge, Clarissa found Talon watching her. His gaze held steady warmth and a question that didn't push. "Ready?" he asked. She looked once more at the shelter, at the barely visible path toward town, at the past she had finally put down. Then she faced the mountains. "I'm ready." They mounted and moved out at an easy pace, sun climbing behind their shoulders. Talon taught as they rode, short, clear words in his language, letting her repeat until the sound sat right. He didn't rush. He smiled when she remembered. By noon, they led the horses to a stream. While they drank, Clarissa leaned over the water. A face stared back, familiar, yet steadier. Still young, yes, but no longer unsure. "What you see?" Talon asked, kneeling to fill a skin. "Someone new," she said. "Someone I'm still learning." He smiled, an expression that softened his whole face. "Good. Always good to learn new things about self." The land shifted as the day wore on. Trees spaced wider. Hills rolled out like blankets. The white of winter cracked open to show dark earth beneath. With each mile, the voice of Cedar Ridge, too young, too proud, too much, grew faint. That night, they camped under a sky so crowded with stars it felt close enough to touch. Talon built a neat fire, then raised the bone flute. The tune he played wasn't sad. It sounded like open trails and first steps. "Tell me about your people," Clarissa said when the music fell quiet. "What should I expect?" He weighed the words. "Some welcome, some not, like everywhere," he said at last. "But my mother, strong woman, she understand. My sister too. Others time will show. And us." The question slipped out before she could soften it. "What are we to each other?" He sat with the firelight on one cheek and night on the other. "Now friends," he answered. "Traveling together. Learning. Later, you choose. Always you choose. I wait. Patient like mountain." The lack of demand made her eyes sting. "What if I choose only friendship? To live among your people, help where I can, but not as—" She couldn't finish. "Then honored friend," he said, without a blink. "Protected. Respected. Your choice." He tipped his head, humor warming his voice. "My mother may be disappointed. She wants grandchildren. But she understands choice, too." Clarissa laughed, a sound that felt like a door opening. "No promises about babies." "No promises needed," he said. "Only truth." They spoke late, trading small stories, childhood memories, hopes that felt risky to name. When sleep came, it wasn't the heavy drop of fear, but the soft drift of beginning again. Days braided into a steady rhythm. Ride, read the sky, cross swollen creeks, share dried meat and cakes, learn a new word, laugh at a missed one, camp early if wind shifted mean. Talon taught her to move with the land instead of against it, to look for game sign, to hear the difference between wind and grass and something alive. On the fourth day, they met a small party on the trail, people of Talon's band heading to trade. Clarissa's stomach nodded, but he spoke quickly in his language. Faces eased. An older woman studied Clarissa, then said something that made Talon's mouth curve. "What did she say?" Clarissa asked once they'd passed. "She say your spirit is good," he replied. "Strong but not hard. Like young tree, bends, does not break. Not a welcome from all, but a door left open." It was enough. On the seventh day, they climbed a final ridge. Talon pointed ahead. The valley below held a settlement, not scattered chance, but order and life. Smoke lifted from cooking fires. Children ran. Horses grazed in calm circles. People worked, called to each other, moved with purpose. "My people," Talon said. Then, quieter, "Your people too, if you choose." Clarissa sat very still. Fear fluttered in her like a caught bird. What if they turned her away? What if she couldn't learn? What if this was a mistake? Talon reached over and covered her fingers on the reins. "Afraid is okay," he said, voice low. "New is always a little afraid. But you not alone. I stand with you. I promise." She turned her hand and laced her fingers through his. It was the first time they'd truly held hands. The simple contact felt like stepping into a house where the fire already burned. "I'm not too young for this," she asked, half a joke, half a plea. "You are the right age to choose your life," he said. "Not too young, not too old. Just right for being Clarissa." They rode down together. Eyes turned to watch, curious, weighing. But Talon's calm steadied the air around them. An older woman came forward as they dismounted, her face strong, weathered by wind and years, eyes warm with intelligence. Clarissa didn't need an introduction to know. Talon's mother. Talon spoke a flowing stream of words. His mother listened, gaze flicking to Clarissa, considering. When he finished, she stepped closer and surprised Clarissa with careful English. "You are the one who chose her own path," she said. "Yes," Clarissa answered. "Good. We need more who choose, not only follow." The woman's smile held inside it the same quiet strength as Talon's. "Welcome. You are guest here. In time, maybe more. First, rest, eat, learn. Then choose again." They led Clarissa into camp. The air smelled of smoke and stew and leather. Work hummed, but did not rush. Children's laughter threaded through it all. With every step, a weight slipped off her shoulders, the weight of being wrong in her own town, the weight of voices saying to this and to that. She had not been too young for love. She had been asking love from the wrong place. Love wasn't ownership or control. It wasn't fitting into a box to earn approval. Love was the right to choose. Love was respect across difference. Love was women standing in a doorway between a mob and a girl. Love was a patient man keeping a fire alive through the night. Love was space to become yourself without apology. And maybe, just maybe, love was also the quiet understanding between two people who did not claim to complete each other, but promised to walk side by side. Clarissa was 18. Standing at a threshold with strangers who might become family. She was young, yes, but not too young. She was exactly the right age to begin being who she was meant to be. The girl who had been too young for Cedar Ridge's love had found something larger, deeper, truer. In choosing it, she finally chose herself. As the sun slipped behind the peaks and painted the sky with rose and gold, Clarissa Hayes stepped into her new life. Behind her lay judgment and small rooms. Ahead lay hard work and wide chances. She felt ready for both.